This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And I'm your host, Dave Jewett. Join us as we take a trip through 1940s France, all while breaking down the weapons of Sniper Elite resistance.
Now, I can't actually remember if this was something that Rebellion picked up on in this collection, or if they've seen it somewhere else. But this is a real thing. The EMP. Quite distinctive, solid wooden foregrip there, and an absolutely immense suppressor. They're trying to experiment with what's the maximum suppression potential without compromising the length and the weight too much. And I think Erma may have gone a little too far with this one.
If you enjoy this kind of content, be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss out on next week's episode. If you can't wait that long, you can head to our Patreon to watch both the extended edition of this episode, as well as check out next week's episode 1 week early. We'll be taking a look at some of the cursed weapons from hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. But whether you join us over there or watch us here on YouTube, thank you so much for your support. And now, it's over to Jonathan.
So this is actually a really interesting choice. We know the Sniper Elite games, they all take place in the Second World War. They all need a starting rifle. This time, we've gone for something more conventional, but probably not that widely known. And it's the M16 family of weapons. No, not that M16 family. Model, modification 16. And the general shape of the thing looks good. I think we might be seeing, I'm hoping we're going to see this length, because when I hear M16 carbine, I think of this. But what we've got here is a sort of one of the longer variants. You know, every game they want something different as a starting rifle, and they want a different roster of weapons, but they also want to keep the stuff that you know and love from other games if possible. So French, tick, correct period, tick. Now, bit of detail here. And by the way, the detail is looking great on these. I've already mentioned the markings. Even the shape of the trigger is... It's a fairly distinctive, crudely shaped, can I say that? It's quite a flat-bladed trigger, quite thick, and that's represented there. I think all the details are present and correct. This weapon, of course, has the very turned-down bolt handle, intended for compactness for use as a carbine. Still works pretty well. Might be handy for crawling around in the dirt as a sniper. That bullet's still looking a little funky, like it did in the previous game. Bit too cylindrical, bit too long and cylindrical. And of course, they've sort of had to standardize on one bullet shape for all of the weapons, so that I believe all the bullets look the same, which they in detail shouldn't.
I do like how suppressors are handled in the modern Sniper Elite games, and that there's like levels of your round being suppressed, whether you're just using a suppressor or you've got a suppressor plus subsonic ammunition, and that can really change on how people are able to hear you.
Yeah, I think it was a good way of tackling it. And this was one of the conversations I had with the developers when that sort of system was first introduced, is we really want to do suppressed rifles. We know that it wasn't really a thing at this time and in these places, but how can we do that in a way that's sort of plausible and technically correct? There's the report at the muzzle, there's the supersonic crack of the bullet, there's potentially noise at the back end as well, depending on the design. So, and you want to try and stamp down on all of those things to make it super quiet. And I think that worked really well to, given the large open spaces that you have in the game, you can use your silencer, suppressor, whatever you'd like to call it, and it will give you a certain advantage. If you can get and sort of keep and jealously hoard your subsonic ammunition, you get that double effect, as you say. Is that realistic for every type of weapon in the game? Probably not for most of them. There were not readily available subsonic loads for every type of rifle ever invented. It's something that's specific to, and really much later as well. But it's something that could have happened, and so they've brought it into this series of games. And I think it's a classic compromise of rule of cool, depth of gameplay, really lending itself well to the stealthing around until everything goes wrong, of course, inevitably, if you're me. And you end up having to submachine gun everybody. It's a compromise I can certainly live with and even enjoy. The brightly coloured tips on the bullets, that's really a gameplay reminder as to what it is you're using. Nobody is going to be redesigning and painting the tips of bullets for subsonic loads, certainly not at this time. You do have different coloured bullet tips for tracer, API, that kind of thing, but your typical sniper bullet's going to look the same coming out of the gun. The FB45 Liberator, not the 2013 3D printed Liberator, the original Liberator. In terms of actual practical utility, it's not great. It is a single shot, manually operated pistol. We pull back our striker, set it to one side, lift up the loading gate, insert a single round. There was some came in the storage compartment in the grip there. Simple striker fired system. If you can hit an enemy soldier with this, and you probably want to get as close as you can and surprise him with it, or maybe do it at night, something like that. It does have a set of very chonky sights. They're not great. Whether as a behind enemy lines sniper you would ever want to pick this up against anything is pretty questionable.
It definitely leans on the idea of it being something you only shoot once. A, because the reload animation takes ages, but it's been given like a gameplay contrivance of making it really strong. So it's like a one-hit kill anywhere on the body, really. At least, head or chest. So you can. It plays on the idea that you just mentioned. Although its audible range was something that stuck out to me, because you can hear it go bang, but the audible range is only 10 meters. So unsuppressed, you hear a loud pop, but people very close to you will continue to go about their business after firing this.
Yeah, that's a little weird, because really with a relatively powerful pistol cartridge and a short barrel, I mean, this is going to be a bit louder than the 1911. So that has to be a case of we've got to give this thing an advantage, otherwise no one's going to use it. I would speculate. Now, if I'm going to be super critical, there's maybe not as much detail on this as there is on a lot of the other weapons in the game. The basic forms are there. You can probably see on this one, the muzzle does protrude. They vary. They're not exactly precision-made bits of kit, but the muzzle does protrude further out beyond this trigger guard than that. This metal strap trigger guard and sight assembly here is a thicker gauge of steel than we're seeing represented there. See that headshot there, that's the sort of range you'd want to use this thing at. It's not a rifled barrel, it's a short barrel, so you're losing a bit of muzzle velocity as well. Yeah, the big pink mist and the one-shot kill. I mean, yeah, in the head, absolutely. Maybe there's a little bit of mythologizing of the 45 ACP round here. The idea that one shot from a 1911 will stop the enemy, but 9mm won't, that kind of FUD lore, as we call it. It is a bigger bullet, so you've got a slightly increased chance of hitting something vital, but not to the extent that you're likely to notice any difference. Of course, being single shot, you're going to go for headshots anyway. Now we're going back in time with French rifles. We've got a Lebel Model 1886. This is the default rifle of the First World War French soldier. You can see, I think, that it looks quite antiquated compared to the Berthier. Although, with more steel exposed on the receiver, maybe not. But it has that visible tube magazine that we can see of 8 rounds of that big old 8x50 Lebel bottlenecked, tapered cartridge. I don't know that you would select a Lebel sniper by choice in the 1940s time frame. I actually think the little shorty M16 Berthier might be a better sniper rifle for the sort of sniping we see done in the game than this big, clunky, heavy, probably not as accurate weapon. And it wouldn't be Sniper Elite without the ability to shoot people in the nuts, would it? Unfortunately. There's something extra disturbing about the kind of Looney Tunes round window that goes and closes in on the poor guy's mangled testes.
I only really included this clip because when I was recording gameplay, the achievement that popped up and said "Das nuts" really made me laugh.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say it's taken me more than one viewing of that achievement because I think they released the achievements a while back and I saw them. I went, "Das nuts." Okay. Oh, I see what the play on words is there. It was embarrassingly slow, even for me. Now, this is a really interesting one. Now, I can't actually remember if this was something that Rebellion picked up on in this collection or if they've seen it somewhere else. But this is a real thing. The EMP. Quite distinctive, solid wooden foregrip there. And an absolutely immense suppressor, which is integral. So you've got gas venting, making it, in theory, very quiet. I actually don't know how quiet this thing got. They've correctly modelled this, or a version of, actually. Ours is a little different. Now, ours is missing the front sight, so this dovetail would have held a nice tall front sight so that you could, well, line it up with the rear sight. End cap on the game gun is a different shape, and I actually don't know if that's incorrect or if that's been modelled off something else. I suspect it's been modelled off a different example. It does feel like it slightly defeats the object of a submachine gun, being a nice compact close quarters weapon. But rather like the experimental SOE suppressed weapons that we have, they're trying to experiment with what's the maximum suppression potential without compromising the length and the weight too much. And I think Erma may have gone a little too far with this one. You can see from that first-person view that the magazine is quite short. That's correct.
I believe this is the quietest submachine gun in the game after modifications as well.
Yeah, it probably should be. I'd love to see some testing done on these. We only have one of this type, so we can't justify really shooting it, unfortunately. It's a very narrow suppressor, but it's a very long one, so it's still got a lot of volume there. I would guess that the sound that I'm hearing here is subjectively about right. That sort of harsh popping sound. Probably going to be in the ballpark of the MP5 SD, the 9mm well rod, that kind of thing. There's only so much you can do to reduce the report of a shot with conventional technology. But yeah, this is a great choice, I think, for something very different, but period appropriate. Even the quite lazy ejection of the cases, I suspect, is accurate.
If you're enjoying this episode, you might want to check out our Patreon. Over there, you can find hours more content in our extended editions, including the hour-long director's cut of this very episode. And you'll also get early access to next week's episode as we take a look at the cursed guns of hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. Either way, thank you for supporting us, watching us here on YouTube, liking the video, commenting, subscribing, all of that good stuff. But let's get back to the video. This is another weapon that you can find in the maps, in crates and stashes. Can't take this into a mission with you.
What could be more snipery than a Bren with a 100-round drum magazine on it? As if the Bren didn't weigh enough to begin with. Now we're shoulder firing it with a great big pan mag on top. Sounds good. Sounds Brenny. Looks Brenny too. But of course without the iconic curved magazine on the top. Now I do have a treat for you on that score, because we do in fact have a Bren with the 100-round drum on it. Now, it isn't just a case of being able to slap this mag on a Bren. And if I can catch a magazine change...
Because it's a found weapon, you don't reload it. As soon as you've expended all the rounds, you dump it.
That's fine though, because, well, A, you're not going to come across more ammo for it, really. But B, there's actually a bit more going on here than you might think. So you have the magazine catch at the rear. Traditionally, you palm the curved magazine off, and then you rock another one on. With this, there's actually a second magazine catch. So you can magazine catch while you magazine catch, I guess. So you need to have 3 hands, pull on that tab, press on the magazine catch at the rear. I can't even do it. I have to do it off camera, because we have to release it at the rear, but we also have to release this thing to then be able to hoik off the magazine with the handy carrying strap. And we can see that that's not a cartridge, that's actually part of the magazine. That's a dummy round that's part of the feed system. So it has that quite a pronounced feed tower attached to the bottom of it. And up through the middle, like a Lewis gun, runs a spigot. And your average Bren does not have a spigot. So you have to convert the gun with that spigot with the second magazine catch on it, and then the two work together to retain the drum. So I normally do praise the Sniper Elite games for their animations in terms of it does feel like you're running with a weapon of that appropriate weight and size. Obviously ignoring the fact that you have another big weapon on the back and you're carrying all sorts of other stuff. This is, and again, because it's a sort of found object in the game and not a focus weapon, not a one you can equip. Maybe he's a little bit too buff, as it were. He's running and throwing this thing around like it's a normal rifle. It's a heavy bit of machine steel with a great big heavy magazine on top of it. But, you know, I would definitely appreciate having the ability to go a bit nuts with this thing when I inevitably fail to maintain stealth. So our old friend, the M1 Garand, or Garand if you prefer. So it looks like for a partial reload, we just eject whatever we've got in the gun. Is that right?
Yeah, you can partially reload, and the animation just shows a full on-block clip. It's not until you fire until empty you get the iconic ping.
I thought it looked full. So you had fired some shots, hadn't you?
Yeah.
So it always ejects either an empty clip
or a full one.
Or a full one, and on a reload it's always a full one. That's a bit of a shame, detail-wise.
Yeah, the partial reload shows all 8 rounds still in the on-block clip, but who's really firing and partially reloading this thing when you can, get the ping out of it?
You can see the scope mount on the breech end of the barrel, which is how the conversion was done for the M1 D. The cleverness of the M1 D is this was a backup idea to the M1 C. Neither of them saw service or saw use in the Second World War, as far as we know, by the way. But they were hedging their bets with the M1D by coming up with a conversion where all you had to do was replace the barrel with a specially made barrel with a scope mount. So normally you'd have 2 mounts, usually ring mounts. In this case, it was just the one, and it's sort of cantilevered. The scope is cantilevered over the action. Offset, because you've got a ping, so you've got to offset. So that's not, in theory, ideal. And for once, nearly for once, the muzzle devices being swappable is accurate, because the standard device is the M2 flash hider, which just clips on over the bayonet lug, hiding the flash rather than suppressing it by literally just with a cone. But you could, in theory, fit other devices as the character in the game does. What's the sort of power level of this thing subjectively? Does it feel nerfed because it's a semi-auto?
No, not that I could tell. It had pretty good effect on target, and with armor-piercing rounds, as you see here, I can shoot through an entire French cottage. Armor-piercing rounds, not cottage-piercing rounds.
Cottage piercing. It's the next level up from armor piercing. Yeah, things like stone, brick, mud, sand, they're all very resistant to bullets. This thing shoots one of the baseline, or the AP version of the 30-06 round is still the benchmark to this day for penetrating steel or ceramic body armor. I'm not aware of a standard for French cottages, but if one existed, you'd be looking at least something like, like a 20mm cannon to get through one wall with one shot. I mean, you're looking at full-on artillery, really. The MAS 38, pretty distinctive French submachine gun with that canted design, but it has a foregrip. Such a funky design. Very compact and lightweight, but with the full wooden stock, makes for quite an unusual look. Always a big fan of how Sniper Elite has handled submachine guns, especially with the ability to go first person. Okay, customization is looking interesting. I can't recall if that sort of buffer tube wire stock is an historical variant of any kind. It's not one that we have. I don't know about suppressors for the MAS 38 either, but if one was available, it would work quite well because it's such a short receiver, short barrel arrangement that you're buying yourself some extra length for a suppressor. Not sure was that a special bullet there? Because I noticed the bullet had a red base to it.
Armor piercing.
Oh, of course. So instead of the tip being painted, they've painted the lead bit of the bullet, I guess. Yeah, armor piercing pistol rounds are a thing, but I don't think they were then. I'm sure somebody was working on them, but you don't have nearly as much velocity to work with to actually have a hardened, penetrated do anything. They only become a thing really with soft body armor later on, where you've got enough people wearing Kevlar that maybe you want to look at a pistol bullet with a sort of hardened, pointed inclusion in the middle of it. They're pretty rare even today. So this is really your French Garand, the MAS 44 semi-automatic rifle. How does this compare to the Garand, do you think?
The Garand felt like it had a bit more punch to it. The MAS 44 feels as though you can fire more rapidly while staying on target. So I'm using wooden bullets at the start of this clip.
I thought that was a wooden bullet. I was going to say, my first thought was, that looks like an old school round-nosed lead bullet from the late 19th century. And I thought, there seems to be some grain to that. I'm guessing they've got this idea from the real baton round, which the early versions of were great big wooden bullets, but they're big. And the idea is they smack you with kinetic energy, pain compliance mechanism of stopping you from doing what you're doing. You can't make a high velocity pointy bit of, even if it's round-nosed, pointy bit of wood less lethal. Well, you can make it less lethal for sure, but it's not going to render you unconscious. It's either going to do enough damage to cause you serious injury, or it's not going to do anything. The real-life wooden bullets, which did exist, were there to be shredded by a muzzle device with blades on it, essentially, and were a form of blank round. Or they were for vampires at close range. Unclear. I think I complained about this last time, but one of the issues with the bullets, as depicted in flight, is that they're fully enveloped in copper jacket. Modern bullets you can do that with, or typically you'd leave the very tip of it open. Period bullets do not. They have an exposed. The pistol bullets have an exposed base. You apply the jacket and there's lead visible in the back. The same should be true of the rifle bullets as well.
This shot was quite hard to capture. I managed to get a round through the scope of the enemy sniper.
I thought that's what was happening. Let me watch that again. Let's see that again. I mean, if it helps, it's very hard to capture in real life as well. Mythbusters tried it, I think twice. Hollywood Weapons, which is an excellent show that if you're watching this, you would probably enjoy. They, I think, failed to reproduce it, but they acknowledged that it's not quite a 1 in a million, but it's something you're not actually trying to do, and it's something that if you shoot enough bullets at enough snipers, is going to happen eventually. So it's very cool that you've managed to pull that off. So this is another fun bit of variety that's entirely appropriate. Here is one of these, SACM 1935. Really quite a nice design, I always think. Like shades of 1911 or crossed with a Beretta almost. That's an interesting quirk of the first person view. Great advantage of me just rather sitting at home talking to you about these things and having these here at the museum is, of course, that when I see something, I can not only react to it, but test it out. And so I've just brought the pistol up to the aim to compare the sight pitches there. And as I suspected, there's a little bit too much light either side of the front sight there. That's, I guess, kind of a field of view thing and something you're just not going to. You're not going to get your hands on an example of every single gun and slavishly represent exactly what the iron sights look like, unless you have a lot of spare time to do that. And it might even be a case of they want to deliberately allow a bit of the world to appear in that plane. Overthinking as always. So that semi-shrouded design of hammer is clearly represented well in the game there. where the slide is sort of extended, or rather the hammer is recessed into the back of the slide so that when it's cocked it sticks out, but when it's fired off it's nice and flush, and the rear sight even prevents it snagging. No snag risk there. Maybe there is on the beaver tail. The beaver tail is so great for a good comfortable grip there. Yeah, really impressed with these pistols. I've seen that grip style of scope mount for a pistol somewhere. I'd be amazed if anyone made one for this though. Oh, okay, we turned it into a whole carbine now. Stocks for pistols obviously are a thing. In fact, I think we have a holster stock for one of these somewhere. There's a lot of customization of pistols in the latter Sniper Elite games. I don't know if it's the angle, but the gun's actually looking a little large there. Compare that in my hand to the protagonist's hand. I think maybe the pistol's depicted a little too large. This thing looks like it's 1911 size and weight, but it really isn't. I guess something like this would make more sense for someone who is Day of the Jackal style, getting just one kill and getting out again. So something that breaks down into bits, doesn't need to be very long ranged, wants to be quiet. We actually have a suppressed pistol carbine in the collection that was allegedly designed for assassinations, but it really is more of a movie thing than a real thing. So this is the Ruby. Now that definitely does look too big. Ruby is a loose term for compact pistols, a certain type made for the French fights in the game in Spain, and Ruby is a nickname. They are small pistols. This thing looks more like a Commander 1911 or something in terms of proportions. I think it should be smaller. Not Calibri, but something smaller than this. But hey, they vary quite a bit. There may be some to this design that are getting on for this big. The Union U-shaped magazine there. I suspect that's why the gun is even in the game in the first place. Clearly, so that you don't have to stop with the length of your magazine. You carry it around to the barrel. Suddenly an absolute ton of muzzle flip there. If anything, there should be less with that weight hanging off the bottom of the gun and that compensator thing on the front.
Is it exaggerated because there's so much more muzzle to flip? If it's got the same animation, it just looks so much more severe.
It probably is that. Yeah, I think it's too much flip, whatever's happening. But I think you're right. I think it's just drawn my attention to it.
This is about as cursed as I could make a pistol, other than, the carbine setup of the previous gun. But even like the U-shaped magazine was a real thing, so it's not even that cursed.
But yeah, it's interesting that the first person apparent muzzle rise is nowhere near what the third person appears to be.
Yeah, third person aiming and first person aiming are not created equal. Like, it's so much more difficult to land accurate shots in third person, especially when you're rapid fire something.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, that's why sights exist. A very interesting inclusion here, the SIG series of submachine guns / carbines. Now, they all have the very funky flip down magazine arrangement, and now we can get the idea that this is actually a machine carbine or a submachine gun. With it folded up, it looks for all the world like a sort of SKS size self-loading rifle type thing. But yeah, these are by design automatic weapons, submachine guns, even in this long barrel. It's distinctive. It's very chunky. Something that I think you do get from the third person view, at least, is how chunky this thing is. It's very wide because they fully encased this thing in wood. At its heart, it's a tubular receiver submachine gun, like a very, very Gucci Sten or something. But because it's got this very thick, full length stock on it, it's really quite distinctive. These angled grooves, I don't know, they lend a certain look to it, and they work quite well for grasping, because if you think about it, you typically don't grasp with your fingers straight up. You grasp like this. Now, what we can't really get from the game, I don't think, is the folding magazine housing. There's not a deploy animation or anything, is there, for that?
No, it's always just deployed.
Great fun, that. I mean, I grew up on Transformers, so anything that folds up is fun. And makes a lot of sense too, especially in this configuration, because you've got something that's comparable to like a cavalry carbine, but with the close range firepower of a submachine gun.
Adam, please edit in the Autobots Transformer sound effect when Jonathan does that. Thank you.
Balancing the player expectations in the 2020s with crafting and customization, I think they've done a good job. Even to this point where you can make things look a little bit silly. Again, it's something that if you were eccentric, you could represent. You could make from real Second World War firearms. Please don't, though. Please don't do that, unless it's reversible. That's foregrip on there. I mean, it's maybe a little implausible because, well, you could fit foregrip under there. But given that the magazine folds up into this slot here, you would be disabling the folding magazine. So can you do the long barrel in customization?
Yeah, so when you customize it to have the longer barrel, all that changes is literally the barrel. The wooden furniture stay the exact same length.
Yeah, interesting. So kind of technically incorrect in that it has the name of the long variant with the long wooden stock, but you can't actually represent that in the game, which is a slight shame. But I'm really pleased that it's in there. Now I just need an excuse to have it fold up. Oh, by the way, 40 round magazine on this thing as well. So that's a bonus, which is correctly represented in the game. This series is locked in on World War II. So actually makes it a great series for us to rabbit about, because the stuff that changes has to be... I almost think of Sniper Elite as like the FIFA of shooters. Each one is an incremental improvement on the last one. You say the same of Call of Duty, of course, but this is more like we want to keep what works, and they do. And so the variety of weapons is inherently limited, but the variety is nonetheless there in every game. They always manage to include some new stuff, and not just skins. The stuff tends to look and feel different as well. I think they justify the inclusion of just about everything.
Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode on the guns of Sniper Elite Resistance. If you did, like the video, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what games or movies you'd like to see on the show. I want to give a massive shout out to all of our supporters over on Patreon for helping to make this content happen. In the description, you'll also find links on how to support the Royal Armouries, as well as links to all of EXP's social pages. But until we see you again next week, thank you again for watching.